Namaste. Welcome to our evening together. And as we settle into the evening, I invite you to just take a few moments with me and to enter into the quiet. And so when we enter into the quiet, we're entering into a space of listening. And that can be a wonderful thing before listening to a talk because it helps us orient to the act of listening in a different way, in a way that functions as a kind of reset. So I invite you to just follow along as I lead this very short guided meditation. As you find yourself listening, whether you're sitting down, lying down, maybe even quietly moving about your home, there's a way that you can enter into a deeper state of listening. It's really supported by a sense of energetically resting lower down in your body. So, feeling your physical form, especially from the neck down, just sensing the very silhouette of your form and how your local body connects with the earth, connects with the law of gravity that really magnetically draws us energetically down toward the earth. I invite you to sense your breath drop from your chest down into your lower belly, to sense your shoulders dropping away from your ears, just feeling your shoulder blades glide down your back just a little further. You might feel your chest opening. You might become more conscious of the sense of how you contact the very seat that you're sitting in, or the floor that you're standing on. Invite your body to feel that it's being held from below, being held by the earth, being held in stillness, by stillness. And invite the energies in your body that are normally pumped up into the top region of the head to be engaged in thought. Just invite all that energy to come to rest and to settle downward. And this isn't just about inviting your body to relax and let down. It's also about feeling a connection with stopping. So, soft curiosity, feel this invitation to stop, to settle, and just be. If you notice a lot of doing, the thinking mind being active, or a lot of energy that's more active in your body, just communicate to the thinking mind, communicate to the energy, asking it to remember what it was before it became busy, before it became stirred up. Just ask it to remember and to show you what it knows of stillness, of stopping. And if that suggestion drops you into a place of not knowing how to stop or what stillness is, just allow yourself to not know. It's actually in this realm of life an advantage to not be filled with knowledge of the thinking mind, but to be able to open into a sense of being free of having to know. And so, as I begin speaking during this presentation, I really encourage you to listen from a place of not needing to acquire a bunch of knowledge for your thinking mind, not needing to acquire a bunch of concepts. I invite you to just enter into a sense of receiving how I'm speaking tonight and just feeling how it might shift your perspectives or even just your energetics of how you hold your body or how you are relating to the present moment. So I'm opening my eyes now, and you're welcome to as well if you like. But you can also just remain in a more meditative state. As I talk to people in these current times, I'm often noticing the great difference between the people who spend time stopping, spend time meditating, and the people who don't. And people sometimes think of meditation as a place to discover a fundamental reality or a sense of essential self, a sense of essential being. And certainly meditation is incredibly valuable for that. And I'll be speaking a bit more about that tonight. But also, meditation is a chance to reset, it's a chance to realign with that sense of your essential self. And that sense of essential self isn't the sense of you that lives in concepts. It isn't the sense of you that lives in identity. It isn't the sense of you that lives in a kind of organizational construct of the past or the future. Those things all have their place. It's valuable to reference the past and the future at times, except for what I'm speaking about tonight is a way of giving yourself permission at times to, let those ways of organizing around past or future, just letting them soften out of your experience, letting yourself be, letting yourself join in this moment in a way that's free of any kind of unconscious habits that are just automatically keeping you seeking or seeking you, keeping you scurrying or striving. It's it's good to give yourself time where you have a conscious joining of this atmosphere of just being, of stopping. And that's different than stopping to go to sleep at night, where we really enter into a more unconscious state, at least for parts of our sleeping life. And when we stop in a more conscious way, we're allowing our whole system, our thinking mind, our nervous system, our sense of self, to be supported by the fullness of being that isn't locked into having to be somebody in particular or get somewhere in particular, to be there instead of here, or to not be where we were in the past and trying to outrun the past. All of that scurrying can benefit from feeling supported by a way of being that's free of those ruts and unconscious movements from within, whether it's from within the thinking mind or from within even the energies of the body. And I think sometimes about how meditation is really kind of strategic in modern life. It's actually this activity that really helps us to have a foundation in a sense of being that is really of a different order than the human consciousness that is kind of locked in this sense of separation of me and you and us and them and what should be, what shouldn't be, just all that sense of positioning all of these opposites that can go on overdrive and mushroom into a sense of division and isolation. And so that whole sort of play of human consciousness is, it can be trying and it can be wearing. And I've had different people write into this very broadcast asking questions and stating how, in their own words, the modern life can sometimes just feel like too much. And it does, especially to the sense of separate self who feel small in the midst of this larger unfolding on the world stage, or even in the breadth of experience of a given day, of all the events and aspects of a given day that unfold. But when we meditate, and I say it's strategic, we open into a sense of ourselves that really joins the present moment. It joins the flow of life in a way where we don't feel held apart. We don't feel as small and as weighted down by things. We join a state of letting go and softening into the present moment in a way that, when we get the hang of that, really can be supportive to reset and clear our minds and reset our nervous systems, bringing them more peace. It can reset something as basic as our breathing. And most of all, in these realms of the teachings of Open Gate, it can shift our perspective of our sense of self. We can see that doing occurs without the need to continually reference ourself as the doer, the I that needs to do this or that wants to do that. We can see that below that whole sort of hamster wheel of the narrative that revolves around the sense of me that we're advocating for or defending, from things, that below that there is a sense of being that doesn't require us to say, I am the one being. There's just being. We enter into the act, the natural expression of just being. And the more we get the hang of that, the more we sense that that just being is appearing as, this arena of life, as this arena, as this person, as this challenge, as this opportunity. And we take things less personally. Some people take things very personally in a way that is both beautiful and difficult. There's a way that when we take things on very personally, let's say, just about a concern that we have about something, um, it could be really a whole gamut of things. Something that's in our immediate um, day that's unfolding, some things that we hear like on a larger world stage in the news. And these things really touch our heart. They connect into our whole set of emotions as well. And they enter into our psyche in a way that um, can be very profound, can be very um, how do I say this? Consciousness altering. And people have written in so much to me lately about the challenges of these various things that are unfolding in the world. And I don't have all the answers. I even though people would expect me to answer their questions, the thing that I really want to share about tonight is something that may be satisfying, it may not be satisfying. But I want to talk about the willingness to sustain the honesty of not knowing. Sometimes when we're either faced with things outwardly or inwardly, we just don't know the territory that we're walking in. We don't know how to respond. We don't know what would make the most sense to our hearts, to our minds, to our souls. And I think that there can be such a pressure on our psyches that we're supposed to know, that we're supposed to act in from some sense of knowing that often is very filled in by the thinking mind, that takes the lead in what we know. And there's certainly a place for the thinking mind. But there's also a way of living in a kind of paradox where the thinking mind could very much want to know, the heart can very much want to know. And also, at the same time, there can be a willingness to not know. And so I hope you can really hear me. I'm not suggesting that, we close out the world or push it out or not address what's before us. But what I'm suggesting is that it's often very valuable to leave some space. Leave some space for a sense of mystery to be at work in our experience, in our shared experience, in our world. A quality of mystery it's not a kind of fall back into, Stupidville. It's a kind of mystery that is potent with possibility. It's alive. I used to love this story that Adya would tell about his teacher Kwang Roshi. And when Adya would spend time at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center when Kwang Roshi was the main abbot there, um, Kwang Roshi was taking trips to different parts of the world to his like sister congregations and brother congregations through in other countries. He very much developed a Zen community in Poland, for example. And Audie always enjoyed listening to him when he got back from his travels and trips because he often had fresh stories that were alive. And On one occasion, Kwang Roshi had come back from a trip to India, and Adyo just really enjoyed the talks he gave upon his return because he was really enlivened by that trip. And one story that I love to have Adyo retell, which is truly a story of Kwang Roshi's, was that Kwang spent some time in a village in India where he was very much taken aback by all of the poverty and all of the ways that the people in the village were doing their best to survive. And he would constantly be being approached by people that were poor who were asking for monies. And on one occasion, he was surrounded by, um, various people that wanted money, and he in particular was um, surrounded by a bunch of young children at one point as he walked down the road, and he stopped and he saw all of these beautiful young children, and they were all begging him for anything that they could give him and pulling at his clothes and whatnot. And he stopped and he just didn't know what to do. He didn't have much money, but he saw how incredibly poor these children were. And he just stopped and he allowed himself to not know. He just took in the scene. He took in the scene before him and he looked at the different stalls and the different, little makeshift shacks and things. And he happened to notice a sign that I think had a picture of a ice cream. And he went over to the ice cream stand and he just asked. He just kind of looked to see, how much is the ice cream. And he realized he had enough to buy quite a bit of ice cream. And so instead of buying the ice cream, he took the hand of a very disfigured little boy and he brought him forward and he gave him the money to hand to the vendor to get the ice cream for all the children. And that little boy got to be, a hero for the day as he helped pass out the ice creams to his friends. And it's a little story, but it has a mighty message when we consider what it's like to not know and simultaneously be willing to know. And there's that paradoxical way of being that is very powerful, and it can take all kinds of forms, can express in all kinds of ways. Have you ever been with someone who's dying? And I smile not because it isn't tremendously sad to lose a loved one, but I smile because there's something very beautiful about letting go of all that we know about a person and simply being with them as they enter into the mystery of the dying process. We don't get, typically, we don't get dress rehearsals for dying. And some people do. They have near-death experiences and come back to tell about them. But most people, they enter into the dying process with not much knowledge. And they're entering into a great unknown. And some people are willing to not know as they enter into that process. And some people aren't willing to not know. They just hold on to the realm of what they know with, white knuckled fingers, just right up until their last breath. They're kind of living out their identity. They're living out their, you could say, their conditioned nature to hold things in certain ways. But when a person is dying who has some willingness to enter into the mystery of it, a person who is living on that edge of being willing not to know and being willing to know at the same time, there's this capacity within them to open to that vista before them. And this is also holds true when we enter into a state of meditation. There can be this capacity to enter into this inner world with a sense of entering into a mystery that we honestly don't know, and yet our heart would very much want to know. And it's that attitude that is incredibly potent and powerful in meditation, or in the sense of just being with someone who's in the process of passing, just being with them to hold their hand or hold their feet, or to sit quietly in a chair next to them. And there's a tremendous breath of communication that happens when we're willing to be together with someone. That says so much, even if we don't speak a lot in words. You know, often people who are older who may feel some of the capacities of their mind slipping away, or we may notice that in them, or we may notice their body giving away and giving out from some of its capacities. There's often less energy in that person to have a lot of discussion, or even to track, a lot of conversation. But they can still feel us. They can still feel our presence. That presence of what it's like to be with and to bear witness. And that has tremendous power, to bear witness to all sorts of things in this life, in this world, to bear witness, and to bear witness with a sense of humanity, with a sense of connecting. And there's definitely a time to speak and to be heard, and there's also a time to not speak and be felt. And it's okay to not always know what mode to be in, or how to express, to how to navigate. And the more comfortable we can become with the very act of not knowing, I don't mean like a stupid not knowing. I mean a willingness to give ourselves permission to be honest when we don't know, and to feel, what's it feel like to not know, and to not insist that we should know. What's it like to peel off that pressure? Sometimes it's already a challenge to not know, but to also overlay on that this insistence that we should know is just not necessary. Now, I'll give you just the most trivial example, but when I was a child, I was a very slow reader. And there were a lot of words that I hadn't learned that other kids had learned. Like I had a slow reading speed, but I also had a low comprehension scores. And when I was entering a new school, I actually was coming from another school where I had all top grades. I was like probably the best student in the class. But when I came to this new school and was transferred to a different town, a different city, I was very far behind. And my comprehension of what the other kids were reading was also far behind. But um, when I brought my homework home, and my mom was a school teacher by training, and I would ask her about certain vocabulary words and things like that, she was just shocked that I didn't know certain things. And she would very rarely be, overtly critical of my scholastics, or maybe I hadn't experienced it yet because I had been at the top of my class. But she, this one day, was just like, I can't believe your vocabulary is so bad. And I just said something like, well, I just asked you what something meant, and how am I going to learn and get good vocabulary if you criticize my asking? I won't want to ask you anymore, and then I'll never learn the words. And so she never criticized me again about it, but she did make an effort to teach me a lot of different words. And my comprehension and reading did improve. But there's this way that when we don't know, and there's some pressure that we're supposed to be knowing, it can make us tight, and it can make us feel um, less than. It can make us feel like maybe we're students of awakening who have fallen behind. And that's really not helpful. Like, I know sometimes we can't help that. We just kind of go into that conclusion and that framework, and that's sometimes just what happens. But to see that, oh, that's a lot of pressure I'm putting on myself, and maybe it's not necessary. Maybe I can come back to a sense of beginner's mind. Maybe I can come back and find an actual advantage in the posture of knowing very little. What's it like to know exceedingly little about the mystery of who you are? What's that like? And what's it like to have that be absolutely okay? And in fact, it can be a great advantage. What's it like to just have that kind of purity of mind, a kind of innocence that isn't filling in, all the conclusions? There's this very classical inquiry pointer. What am I? And when people engage, what am I? They're often kind of in that mode of being in school, being in school and thinking like, oh, I got to find the answer and I've got to fill in the blank. I am blank, fill in the blank. And in these waters of conscious living, in these waters of conscious realization, things are very different. That whole orientation of what am I blank, and this urge to fill in the blank is just not going to work in these waters. It's more about, instead of filling in, it's more about freeing up. And part of that is freeing up this notion that we're supposed to know, and going a layer underneath. If we find ourselves saying, I don't know, when we go a layer underneath that, we sense that's being spoken from a place of truth, place of honesty. And that place of truth underneath the words, that's interesting territory. When you say, I don't know something, what knows that you don't know something? What's that place inside where the truth of that registers? Comes from deep within the core of your being. We could maybe say it arises out of nowhere or it arises out of nothing, but it's not some sort of vacuous nothing. It's this realm of knowledge, the knowledge that we don't know. Isn't that paradoxical? That paradoxical territory, that's the golden territory of conscious realization, of conscious living. There's this golden territory in which the very essence of what you are is knowledge of being. But it's not knowledge of being blank, fill in the blank. It's a step backwards. It's underneath. It's more core. It's more essential. It's this realm of being knowingly. And we know by engaging in the very act of being. That's what it is to be knowingly. But it's this simple act. It's not about all the overlays of being X, Y, and Z, of having to be someone, of having to be here, having to be there, having not be here, not be there. It's just the being part. Some call this, the great I am. But it's not the I that has this whole story about itself. It's this sense of I am. And where does a statement like that come from? It comes from this deep knowledge of being. And so, in this process of freeing up ideas about ourselves, of all that we take ourselves to be, we're peeling those off and letting those slough off, and we're coming back into this sense of what I am. And that am doesn't have a lot of qualities. It's not so easy to speak of. But it's curious how something can be empty of all these descriptors and yet so full of this sense of amness, this sense of being. Now, some would say it's void of qualities. Some might sort of try to point at it with certain qualities. It's rather free, or it's rather still, or it's rather quiet. It's rather mysterious. And so we're pointing at it with qualities, and yet it's so essential that it doesn't lend itself to a lot of descriptors. And that's how you know you're in the waters of the very ground of consciousness. One person wrote in and they had a question that captured my attention, and I know this person. It's beautiful to hear from them with this question. I hope you are doing well. I have a question regarding the who am I inquiry. As I work through my conditioning, I find myself arriving at I, quote unquote. However, when I ask who am I, nothing happens except that I notice a void. Do you have any pointers or guidance that might help me with this? I do. People can come upon this sense of void that is void of quality, or their whole way of looking and being aware just gets reduced to, not reduced in a sense of diminished, but just it gets simplified into a mode of being that isn't continually filling in with narration or spatial organization or conclusion. I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that. There's just this sense of awareness, this sense of awareing, if we could make that a verb, just this function of awareing. Even the I thought can slip away. It's less about I am aware and just awareness functioning through your looking, through your listening. And in that state of what we might call essential awareness, it's void of all of the descriptors being filled in. It doesn't mean that life isn't continuing to unfold in its whole display, but the one that's aware just becomes a lot more quiet inside. The mind becomes more still. And it enters into a mode where it's not relating to all the descriptors and qualities, and experience becomes void of those. Again, not void in a vacuous way. That would be another descriptor of the thinking mind. Some people get spooked by a sense of void because their mind projects a bunch of emptiness onto it, or blackness, or unknown. And the mind can kind of get spooked. When the mind is more quiet, it just simply goes into this state of consciousness that's more still. It's more free. It's more simple. Now, this isn't the goal to always have a simple mind or always, cling to freedom. But in terms of meditation, it can be a very advanced place to just go into beginner's mind. Who would have thought another paradoxical scenario where the most advanced meditation is the most purely simple? And so if you find yourself coming upon a sense of void, it might have a quality to it. You might sort of feel more withdrawn into this sort of velvety dark state. And if that's the case, just let your mind dunk into that and just be really washed clean in the immaculacy of that state of consciousness that's free of all of the descriptors, of all of the overlays. Sometimes I talk about it as just like entering into the womb of the universe. It's probably too many words, but it gives a feeling of what's it like to just sort of go back to a state where you're being held and you're a part of something else that is caring for your life and just holding you in this this state of comfort where all your needs are met in that moment. And it can be very nourishing. People can come out very refreshed from that kind of state. And they can come out feeling cleansed. Sometimes they'll just feel like parts of themselves that they were energetically carrying, that they just kind of dissolve. They peel away. And then a person, emerges and re-engages in life, and they just are curiously free of what wasn't necessary, which may feel very um, good and light. It may also feel a little disorienting. Like, oh, I'm no longer kind of orienting in the same way, constellating around, the sense of myself or itself in the same way, or seeing the world or the play of life in the same way. And it may feel more freed up of taking things so personally. There's a difference between taking things personally and feeling deeply. And sometimes the two get very kind of intertwined. And so when some people talk about Buddhist teachings or meditation paths leading to states of greater unattachment, they can be talking about this feeling of kind of peeling away some of the attachments that further a sense of weightiness and separation. And in freeing those binds, those sort of concretized conclusions or energetic holdings that really aren't necessary, when those are freed up, there can be a greater sense of flow and ease to respond, or to just simply sit with and not know, and enter into a realm of possibility where knowings do come and the way forward does reveal. Now, some might argue with me and say, well, wait a minute, maybe some of that stuff that fell away is needed. Maybe people enter into a state of feeling very unboundaried because they feel unbounded. But when they notice that happening, life kind of teaches them, oh, I can feel less boundaried by a constricted sense of self, and yet express boundaries like this doesn't work, and I know that this is important to me, and whatever the various boundaries are, but some of that can take a while, because usually the pendulum swings from feeling really bound in one direction and then more freed up in another. And then as the pendulum swings back and forth, a person kind of feels how to reintegrate into engaging in life with taking things not quite so personally, in the sense of being put upon with whatever's happening, and yet moving from a place that's deeply authentic and unique to that individual, to that soul, to that person's incredible incarnation that just naturally often wants to engage in life. Now, a few people wrote in. I'm not sure if I can finish that last sentence. Just the main pointer to the person who wrote in about noticing a void is just be there. Just hang out in that. And just be willing to not know, to not not fill in that sense of void with ideas or conclusions. And I gave a few to ideas too, which you could peel away. But mostly, I just gave them to help you feel more comfortable in that sense of sensing that void. And the more you stop and the more you just let that be, the more it's not separate from you in the sense of like, well, what do I do with this? As though it's an object of perception. You just simply stop and allow yourself to be. And then the question itself begins to dissolve. Any kind of question about who am I, any kind of question about the void, any kind of question about what to do, just let all that free up. Those questions, just they don't really answer themselves. They more just like disappear. And the knowledge is in being. So some people are talking about just not really having the energy to like engage in their incarnation, and I want to just circle back to that for a minute. People who, let's say, have just seemed like they've tried everything in the spiritual search, they might not have tried not trying. They might not have tried just being, might not have tried not figuring things out. And that's why I really wanted to begin tonight about the willingness to not know. Now, some people kind of have a fear of that. Like, gosh, if I go into a state of not knowing, nothing will ever change, nothing will ever be addressed, nothing will ever get done. Do you know that? Do you know that? Do you really think that everything that's ever changed or gotten done has been so because people were clinging with their white knuckles to everything they know? Maybe. Maybe they really sustained like an intention of just, I know this. They just kept with that and they sustained that. And they got a great distance. Or maybe it didn't work out so well. Maybe it's just like, I know. And there's that vehemence that becomes combative or becomes divisive. And that usually just doesn't go over that well. And I'm making grand sweeping conclusions. And so the important thing is to live in the paradox of being willing to know, being willing to be clear, and also having some space for possibility, for mystery. It's a nice little report from China. Thank you. And so this is the person who wrote in about motivation. Dear Mukti, thank you for your guidance. I want to speak honestly from where I actually am rather than focusing on the occasional moments when I feel okayness, relief, or love. I see clearly that my life has been shaped by a series of conditionings, each carrying its own thoughts, perspectives, feelings, choices, and reactions. Over many years, I've tried to question, transform, or simply acknowledge these conditionings, but again and again, I end up in the same place. Recognizing a thought as faulty does not allow me to change it, nor does wanting it to be different. I feel deeply exhausted A recurring sense of hollowness keeps arising throughout the day, from waking until just before sleep. Each morning the question appears, what am I supposed to do today? The motivations that once moved me no longer function. Even generating basic thoughts about life, work, earning money, paying bills, requires enormous energy and often collapses into deeper confusion. I have been in this state for a long time. I find it increasingly difficult to discern what, if anything, I'm actually doing. And even spiritual practice feels exhausting. I'm sharing this to ask for your guidance on how to relate to this phase without forcing movement or resolution, with sincerity and gratitude. So I hope that some of this talk is helping, because your question was in part inspiring my talk about this willingness to both know and not know. But it's not something that plays out on the order of the thinking mind, because the thinking mind loves to search. Like, I'm supposed to know what to do today. What do I do today? And it starts to consider and track and question, maybe go through the options. And there's certainly a place for that. I do that. But also there's a time that you can spend in just not knowing. The kind of not knowing, it's not powerless at all. It's not like that, "Oh, I don't know, I don't ask me, I don't know." It's not that kind of not knowing. It's just like, what's it like not to supposed to know? What's it like not to have to know? What's it like to sense that I know that I don't know? That's just honest. What's it like to sense that? To just drop into that paradox. Gosh, I know that I don't know. That's a paradox. You feel how that's not a powerless unknowing? It's just a different paradigm. It's a different way of being. And often it kind of fills that hollowness. Sometimes hollowness is actually like the body's language that is basically saying this needs to be filled. It's like kind of puts off this vibe of hollow, hollow, hollow. And if we turn our attention into it, our attention fills it. If we drop our energetics into it, it satiates the hollowness. It's almost like the hollowness is like saying, come here. This may or may not be true for you, but in a lot of situations, I found that this is the case. You ever notice that a sense of stopping fills the hollowness? It like returns all the energies in the system to this core. It's like a root ball of a tree or an anchor that's a ballast toward the earth. But a big part of it is disengaging from the top heavy energetics that feel you're supposed to know, that seek to know, that strive to know. It's about freeing all that energy up, just letting it settle with gravity. Probably feel the mind going, well, what about the bills? What about this deadline? What about this? And that's what the minds do. And just like, okay, just not going there. I'm just gonna. The bills will be there 5 minutes from now. You can go back in 5 minutes. You can go back tomorrow, the next day. One time I was with someone and just in a little bit of a hurry to get into, I think I was about to give a talk or something like that. And the person just said, can always take a moment. And I was like, wow, you can always take a moment. What a great pointer. You can always just take a moment. What's it like to not know for a moment? And to know that. There's this other thing that's very paradoxical. It might be something that you could try on the person whose question I just answered. It's all about just kind of experimenting with things and trying them and being very, very sincere in engaging what you try. There's this paradox where sometimes, in order to overcome exhaustion, we need to expend energy. It's like, well, what? I don't have the energy. How can I expend it? But it also takes often a lot of energy to identify with being exhausted. It's like, okay, there's exhaustion, there's tiredness, there's what I feel. That isn't what I am. What is it that knows I'm exhausted? What is it that knows things are difficult? What is that? And what if that could be free of definitions, of qualities of being exhausted or being confronted with difficulty? I get that those are this person's genuine experience, and I've genuinely experienced these as well. Maybe not in the same way. Each of us experience things differently. And yet, a lot of the dynamics are the same. What if we could just free up a little bit of energy by not letting what we feel define what we are, not letting our experience tell us what is aware of your experience. And so if we kind of go in a subtractive direction, kind of resting back out of I am this, exhausted, stressed, whatever it is that a given person fills in. What if we just step backwards from that? Right back into amness. The crazy thing about that is it takes zero effort. unless it takes just enough effort to check it out, just enough effort to being willing not to know, just enough effort to being willing to stop, just enough effort to see the striving to change my situation, the striving to know is actually exhausting. Now, you see, none of this is an answer to what do I do with my life or how do I get my bills paid. Or, it's not an answer in the traditional sense. There's a time for practical thinking and engaging those thoughts. There's also a time to just be. And these are mutually supportive. You know, when we have our bills paid or we have a livelihood, it can be helpful to just meet our creature needs. And when those needs are met, we may feel like we can afford to meditate more, rest more. We may feel like the conditions are supportive for us to just be. But also, when we just be and let ourselves fill up with the peace, with the truth of that knowing that we don't know. Just let ourselves fill up with that. We start to be more available to insight, be more available to being conscious of, oh, life is telling me lean this way or lean that way, or life is telling me to pay attention here or to let go there. And so meditation, what I said earlier, it's just very practical. It's like a survival tactic in a way. It helps us become clear and bring that clarity and that peace and that ease into engaging this business of life. I think a lot of the people, not everyone, but some of the people who are writing in, I'm not sure if they're meditating. And I know, like, sometimes when I would hear to meditate more throughout my life, I'd be like, oh man, you just said the very thing I didn't want to hear. I don't want to meditate more. I have to confront my monkey mind. I have to confront my restlessness or my uncomfortable feelings in the body that, from whatever it is, trying to sit straight or what have you. And yet there's a way of meditating that really starts to turn things around. And that is when we just get the sense of, what is meditating me? What is that mystery? What is it that's looking out my eyes, that's listening to the quiet as I just sit here? It's watching my breath move my body this way and that. My stomach moves forward, it moves back, or if we're laying down, it moves up, it moves down. What is that? What is it that's noticing all this? What is it that's hearing, seeing, sensing, feeling, looking? What's that? And what's it like to be that and have that do the meditating? It's like when we're exhausted by meditation, we're not letting ourselves be meditated. When I teach Qigong, which you may have been exposed to from, my Mukti's yogic Qigong routine on YouTube or on our website, there's something I'm really trying to convey, which is as you feel the energy of earth come up through your body, as you feel the sunlight pour down into the very core of your being, as you feel the space all around you being breathed in, and as you breathe out and let your breath join the space all around you, these elements can be what really initiate the movements of qigong, that really are the energy that moves your hands or moves your breath, moves your feet. And it's like being qigonged, just like I was talking about being meditated. When we chant, we're chanting, let's say we're chanting to a name of God. It's as though spirit is chanting us. We're being chanted. The devotion that moves us is coming through our words. It's life speaking to life, God speaking to God, spirit speaking to God through song. And so there's these ways of engaging activity that really teach us about what it is to be less exhausted. Now, I myself really understand exhaustion. There can be a way that even if we're doing a lot, like I engage a lot as the head teacher, as the head administrator of Open Gate, as just a human being in the modern realm, modern world. And it can be physically exhausting. And sometimes that very vessel, that instrument, has a lot moving through it, and sometimes it's too much for the limitations of form. So even though there's this energy that can move the vessel, the actual body, has its limitations. It needs its rest time, it needs its sleep. But as we might find ourselves in situations where we're really just very tired, some of it can be that we're very physically tired, and some of it can almost be more like we're psychically tired. Now we have to really, not that we have to, but it can be beneficial to be curious, to lean in. What do I know about this? What do I not know about this? And to kind of sustain this tension of curiosity and willingness to not know. That tension of being willing to know and being willing to not know. And it's this kind of powerful curiosity that's very open and receptive, and yet very intentional. So I love the honesty of this person, because they're really saying that they want to see through this state they've been in for a long time. I can see that they're really looking into things honestly. They're clearly looking at how things have shaped their life. They're able to recognize certain thought patterns. But they can't change things. And that's a great insight. To be able to see thoughts that aren't untrue, but doesn't allow this person writing in, to change those thoughts. Nor does all the wishing that wants those thoughts or what we're thinking about to be different change things. So then the question becomes, what does change things? What if you could see the thoughts without the idea that they need to change? We're not saying nothing will change. We're just kind of holding that creative tension. Look at a thought, free of the insistence that it needs to change. What's that like? Isn't that weird that I would say that? You're like, wow, of all the things she could say, that change might actually come by an attitude of not insisting that change come. That's really important. The other thing that's really important is when you really want something to be different, and that's just the honest truth, look deeper. What do you want more? Get to the root. What do you want more than that? 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 Just keep going with it. Keep going with it until you get to the bottom. So let your strength of honesty take you to the root of what you want most of all. And often, right there in the middle of what you want most of all, you really touch into that. You touch into a paradoxical realm. I'll give you an example. One time I was driving down the road, I was so filled with a feeling of what I wanted that it just felt very difficult to sustain that feeling. It's like, this has got me in its grips. So I pulled over and I just sat there and I did exactly what I was just telling you. What do I want more than that? What do I want more than that? What do I want more than that? And that and that. I got to the bottom, and in my experience, not saying this is your bottom, but what was my bottom was I was like, oh, I want not to want. I just want to be free of wanting. And I was like, what's it like to want, not to want? And I just landed in this honest place. And when we land in knowing a truth, and knowing the truth of simply be, stopping, whatever it is, when we get there, deep inside, that's home. That is home. It's a whole atmosphere of being. It's an inherently right sense of place. So it's more important to feel what I'm saying and just like follow along, make it your own. So I was trying to also answer at the same time this person who wrote in, and I'll just kind of skip down. They said, from your perspective, if you can, I'll just skip ahead. What is the felt effect of returning to balance, to peace, to home? So trying to be describing that tonight. Sense of feeling your way back to a sense of root in your being. What's the most important? what is it that I want the most? What is it that I know the deepest? These kinds of questions, they just keep steering us to a deeper layer, to a deeper knowledge, to a more stripped down, essential sense of knowingly being. That's the direction. Okay. So another person talks about watching, but also having this feeling of waiting. And that's an interesting kind of take on what I'm describing. Like you can get a sense of stopping, you can get a sense of even arriving, but there might be some little piece in there that's waiting for something to happen, waiting for some shift, waiting for some insight, waiting for some felt sense to dawn or come upon you. And if you could give that waiting a posture, what would you give it? Would it be like, would it be leaning forward a bit? Would it be leaning back? What would it be? And if you could feel that and could inhabit it, and then just trust your instinct. Like if something in you's like this, and you just see that, you really see it. Oh, something in me is like this. When you really notice that, just let your body do what it wants to do. Does it want to go like that? It's like, and you really notice it, and you're like, boy, and you just let yourself feel it. Maybe you're just like, gosh, I feel like a 3-year-old, or I feel like a whatever it is, I feel like a resistant teenager or whatever. Just what does your instinct tell you when you really let yourself enter into that? Maybe some part of you is like, okay, I'm done with that. And there's just, I don't know that you'll have the same response that I do. You have your own authentic experience, but I'm giving ideas. Just kind of let your consciousness really see and notice, and then let your instincts kick in. What's it like to be and not have to have that sense of I who's waiting for something to happen? What's it like to be and have that as the happening? Instead of wanting to know or experience what is it like to be free of that? To be free of seeking, to be free of striving for something different, more, better. What's that like? So this is my invitation for you to really experiment, to live in these paradoxes, being willing to not know and being willing to know, to that kind of edge of curiosity that's open and receptive, but steady, intentional. It's that blend. It's in those blending waters that just the gold shines. So I hope that that's very helpful. Now, as we conclude our time together, I do have a couple of announcements, and I want to invite you to an event that's coming up online. I'm teaching a retreat for the weekend of March 13th through the 15th. And I want to tell you about this not just like as a marketing thing, but as a sharing that from my own experience, retreats are incredibly powerful. They're a time that's dedicated, where you just let the other things that pull at you at life, just let them be set aside. And you give space for this kind of, I don't know if you call it creative tension, but it's that tension where possibility blooms. And when we give space for that, we give space for just allowing ourselves to be, and also being interested. What is this? To consciously be, to be engaged in the moment, to be inhabiting our bodies and being held in this body of life. What's it like to just give time to just allow ourselves to sit, allow ourselves to do some walking meditation or some qigong, and to listen to some talks like this, just to really be encouraged, to be supported in these explorations. So this online retreat is 3 full days. It includes several periods of meditation, a guided meditation or two throughout the day. There's some qigong. I'll be offering talks like this in the morning, Q&A sessions in the evening where I'll be answering questions, and audio will be joining us for the afternoon silent meditations, and he'll offer a guided here and there. So I'll be mainly on in the mornings and in the evenings, and in the in-between, audio will be online in the virtual meditation hall, ringing the bells and helping anchor us all into the format of these rhythms of retreat that Open Gate has really worked on for decades. Just these kind of refining these rhythms that we find to be supportive for people to give themselves a deep dive into being. So I invite you to check that out. The details about the retreat are online at muktisource.org. I think right on the homepage, if you scroll down, there's a link for more information. And that registration will be open for a bit. And there's also, by the way, there are some scholarships for that. So check it out. Our next free broadcast will be on Wednesday, February 11th at 6 p.m. Pacific. This will be a replay of a 2023 talk that Adyashanti's given from a broadcast he did in 2023 called Clarity and Transformation. It will be available on Adya's YouTube channel for 48 hours. You also consider joining us for Sunday, February 8th for Sunday Community Practice. This 2-hour program begins at 9 and includes a guided meditation and a talk. You can also join for the early program at 8 for the silent meditation. Adya joins for the meditations, and then I typically offer the talk. Details about all these events are available on our website. Thanks for joining, and thanks for really holding that tension of knowing and not knowing. Namaste.